All right, there we go. Good morning, Cornerstone. Go ahead and turn your Bibles over to Luke chapter 5. We will begin there in a moment. It is great to be with you this morning. Natasha and I had an opportunity to get away for a couple days this week on spring break week because my older sister took Noel to New York, and so we were kidless. And, I was telling Mike Asen, we have a saying in our family that if the kids go with us, it's a family trip. If they don't go, it's a vacation. And so, we actually had a chance to actually have a little bit of a vacation, and that was a ton of fun. I hope you had a great spring break week. I hope you had a great time reflecting on Jesus, and I appreciate, again, the Smiths just calling us back to that question about the most important day in your life, and perhaps you were reflecting on that this week and pondering that this week. I was thinking about my message last week and the idea of, if I was able to just sort of sit down with Jesus as a friend and have a conversation. And I had the chance to ask him, what is the most important day, or what was the most important day of your life? And I think he would have shared, about the day of his death, burial, and, his death and burial, right? And then sort of coupled with that entire weekend, his resurrection. And so I was thinking about Jesus and just what it would be like to have that kind of friendship with him. And so I started to reflect on, my message for this week and thinking about the idea of friendship. So why would these guys that were his friends, James, Peter, John, Thomas, Simon, so on and so forth, Matthias, why would they be willing to be as bold as they were after they were as scared as they had been? And why would they be willing to go to the lengths where they would die for him? I don't think it was merely because he was their Lord, though that is true and was true. I don't think it was merely because he was their Savior, which was true and is true. I also tend to think in a lot of ways it's because Jesus was their friend. I mean, he even said to them, I no longer call you servants, I call you my friends, because I've told you everything, right? I've told you everything that I've learned from my Father. And so I think on the basis in a lot of ways of their friendship, they were willing to do some of the things that they did for Jesus. So today I want to talk about friendship a little bit. So an opening question for you to think about. Not what? Oh man, that's bad, Profe. That's bad. What was your childhood? Who was what? Maybe you had an imaginary friend. There's a movie coming out called If, imaginary friend. Maybe that's what the Holy Spirit wanted me to say, But who was your childhood best friend? And how did you become best friends? My childhood best friend was a guy by the name of Patrick Moran, and I think a lot of it came from just we played together. We lived in the same neighborhood. We rode bikes together. We played soccer together at school. We played basketball and football together in the streets. But what about you? When you think about your childhood best friend, right? Who was it, and how did y'all even become friends? What was the basis of that friendship? And then you get a little older, maybe they stayed the same. Maybe you had to move schools, or how it is sometimes you go, that transition from elementary to middle school. I know my middle schoolers can feel this. Sometimes it feels like somebody was your buddy and your friend in elementary, and then you get to middle school and they acting brand new, right? And so suddenly you get a new best friend when you're in middle school or high school. And I know, Patrick and I stayed friends all through high school. I also picked up a female best friend by the name of Leslie. And so Patrick and Leslie, they were kind of my best friends. So who was your best friend in high school and or college? And how did you all become friends? And then what about now? Who's your best friend now? Very easy question for me. Natasha Gardner is my best friend, without question. She's awesome. She's amazing. I'm also very, very fortunate. I feel like over my life, I've had lots of best friends at all stages, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. I also think about, Greg Dixon, Byron Word, some of my closest friends here at Cornerstone. But what about you? Who is your best friend now? We talk a lot about the miracles of Jesus and the miracle that he turned water into wine. And we talk about the miracle of Jesus and how he walked on the water. Very few people talk about the miracle of Jesus having 12 close friends in his 30s. Right? You know, because I think we know this, right? It's one thing when you're in school and you're there together every day and you're at PE or you play the soccer team, you live in the same neighborhood, or when you go to college, man, and you just got time on time on time and you're just hanging out in the dorm rooms and you go on trips together and all those things. And in a lot of ways, it's sort of easy in those stages, right? Because you're kind of forced in some ways to be with people based on school. But then once you go to, you become an adult and you go to work and yeah, you can have friends at work, but there's a line, right? Like there's just you're my work friends and then you have your real friends, or sometimes, right, if you look at a modern day sitcom, some people, and this is true for adults, it is so hard to make friends as an adult. Their only friends are their work friends. Some of y'all are nodding your head because you know this, right? Especially if you've moved to another city for a job, just how hard it is to sometimes just make friends. And so, when I think about the example of Jesus and what sort of friend was he and how did Jesus have the friendships he had, I just want to look at several scriptures this morning and just try to get a glimpse into the friendships of Jesus and see, man, what in this can I imitate? What in this do we as Cornerstone Church need to imitate? I've said this before. I'll say it again. I think Cornerstone is great at first contact, great at second contact. If you're visiting here, everybody's going to love up on you. They're going to hug you. You're going to be like, gosh, who are these people? Why is everybody hugging me? I met Greg's cousin, and she went for the hand, and I said, I'm a hugger. Just hug me, and I hope it was all right. She stayed. She's still here. She's smiling, But we're great at first contact, right? But how are we after that? Right? How do we go from acquaintances to friendships? How do we go from Chick-fil-A drive-through? Because guess what? Those people are super friendly. Right? Now other people are even saying it. Nobody even says you're welcome anymore. They just say, my pleasure, right? They've changed the culture, right? Other restaurants are doing this. And I think in a lot of ways at church, we can have Chick-fil-A friendships where we're friendly, we're warm. You want to come back. But I think if we look at my pleasure, it'd be my pleasure to come back. But I think if we can look at Jesus, we can go from kind of the drive-through, the drive-by, the first, second contact friendships to some deep and lasting, some friendships that will walk with people from now to the streets of gold. So let's look at a couple of examples. I'm going to focus in on Jesus with James, Peter, and John, and just a couple of different passages, and just kind of try to make some points, some things that I've learned in life. I try to be a good friend. I'm really not great at it sometimes. Natasha and I were talking about this the other day. We tend to be the kind of people that, I can have a 2-hour conversation with somebody, and then I'm like good for a good while, right? And then there's some people out there, you need to talk to your friends every single day. We're just not like that, so I'm sorry. Byron, Greg, I know, my buddies, I know everybody. I just, we tend to be good and we're so busy, but there's no excuse. I think when we look at Jesus, if he is the standard, not just what makes me comfortable, not just how I was raised, not just, what I think about friendship, but if I'm following Jesus, my friendships should really imitate the type of friendships that he had. Over in Luke chapter 5 and verse 1, it says, as the crowd was pressing in on Jesus to hear God's word, he was standing by Lake Gennesaret. That's just another name for the Sea of Galilee. He saw 2 boats at the edge of the lake. The fishermen had left them, and they were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, which belonged to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from the land. Then he sat down and was teaching the crowds from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, put out into deep water and let down your nets for a catch. Master, Simon replied, we've worked hard all night long and caught nothing. But if you say so, I'll let down the nets. When they did this, they caught a great number of fish, and their nets began to tear. So they signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them. They came in the boat and filled both boats so full, that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, go away from me, Lord, because I'm a sinful man. For he and all those with him were amazed at the catch of fish they had taken, and so were James and John, Zebedee's sons, who were Simon's partners. Don't be afraid, Jesus told Simon. From now on, you will be catching people. Then they brought the boats to land. They left everything and followed him. When you think about how you and your best friend became best friend as a child, a lot of times friendships can be built and they're just organic, right? Sometimes it is just, you were sitting next to that person in class in kindergarten and they were the first person to say hi to you and it just sort of happened. And from then on, y'all became friends. Or again, you were on the same sports team and you realized you lived close to and then you started just sort of hanging out. And I think in a perfect world, it would always be like that. Where you just sort of, where you don't find friendship, friendship finds you. But I think when you really look at what is, and again, we're talking about, especially for those of us, now that we're a little bit older, right? I think there has to be, first point I want to sort of make is there has to be a level of intentionality to have great friendships. If you were to go back and read Luke chapter 4, Jesus had preached in the synagogue in Capernaum where Simon lived. He had cast out a demon, so he'd been there for some time, right? He was teaching. He went to Simon's house. He healed his mother-in-law. He stayed there all night healing people. There was some relationship building that was going on. Jesus was sort of looking at who are going to be my people. I think, again, there's the God side, the know everything, absolutely, and I think there's a human side of Jesus where he allowed himself to just experience life as a human. And I don't think that when he was born, in Bethlehem, he was thinking, oh, James, Peter, John, Judas, right? Like, no, I think there was some level of intentionality. He saw something about these guys, said, I'm going to go stay at your house. And he called those guys, and then he saw Simon react to this situation when he did the miraculous catch of fish, and he said, this is somebody I want to invest in. And he made a decision, you know what? You and I are going to be close. I want you to come follow me. Come be with me. Now, obviously, Jesus was the master, the rabbi, and they were the student, right? Let's not forget that point. But even with that, I still think Jesus had to be the type of guy that you just wanted to be around. Right? He wasn't just this guy, you blow him and he falls over and he just hangs out with lambs and children all the time. And he's just, Jesus was a carpenter, right? Jesus was a guy who could command thousands of people. Jesus was a guy Steve Gooch shared a couple weeks when he said, I am, the soldiers fell over, right? So he wasn't some punk, he wasn't some wimp, right? But he was also a guy that children came up to and they did want to be around him. Right? So he had to be jovial. He had to be joyful. He had to be joyous. And so I think, there was some level of, yes, I want to follow you as my rabbi, but man, this is just a cool guy to hang out with. Right? Jesus was fun and jovial. And I love that Jesus made this intentional decision to go after a friendship with James, Peter, and John. Some of the first guys he called. And they started just walking around, talking, spending time together. And so when I think about some of the best friends I've had, when I first became a disciple, a guy by the name of Lee McLemore. I'm so glad I met Lee McLemore. You know why? I'm so glad I met Lee McLemore because he introduced me to Natasha Brown at the time. Right? But no, Lee is just, man, we realized we liked college basketball. We were just kind of silly. And so I just made a decision. I would go over and hang out at his brother's, even though he was in West Georgia's ministry and I was in the Georgia Tech ministry. I made a decision to invest in that friendship. We were the best men in each other's wedding. Right? I just went after a friendship with Lee, and we've been friends for years. I was thinking about, I was looking through some old pictures, and I was just there when his first daughter was born. I went to the hospital. I have pictures of when Layla was born, right? But I made a decision to be friends with Lee. Think about a guy by the name of Kyle Spears. When we moved to Kansas City. And think about me that, scared some people off again. You're like, man, this church is so friendly. I think somebody once said, is this a church that overshares? Because, first time I met Kyle in Kansas City, we just started talking. And, man, I just went all in. This is what's going on with my marriage. This is what's going on with my parenting. And it was just like, he was probably like, whoa. Like, Kyle is a therapist now. I like to think he was trained being my best friend. Kyle's a pretty famous therapist now. But, there was somewhat of a connection, but then I chose to be vulnerable, to be open, to go deep, right? And so when you talk about your friendships, I think one of the keys that Jesus had was intentionality. He saw people said, come follow me. I want to choose you. Zacchaeus, I'm going to stay at your house. Jesus was very intentional in his relationships. What about us? I think sometimes we can just think, oh, and again, amen, we have the greatest thing in common that we need, the Holy Spirit, right? The blood of Jesus. But you've also still got to make efforts for friendships. You've got to say, you know what? I'm going to go after being a friend with you. Hey, can we grab some time this week? Right? Matter of fact, can we grab some time for the next few weeks? Right? Can we just put it on a calendar where we pray together every day at 3:00? Right? And that's how you start to build friendships, because I think sometimes we can come in church and we just sort of expect that we're going to have great friendships and they're going to happen by osmosis, but you've got to, like anything in life, right? You've got to invest in friendships. How are we about that? If not, then today is a great day to make some intentional decisions after service. I'm going to build a friendship with that person. Right? So, I think that's one of the things we can learn from Jesus. How can we have harmony in our friendships? It's going to take, first off, some intentionality. Over in Luke chapter 8, in verse 40, said, when Jesus returned, this is verse 40 of Luke chapter 8, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Just then a man named Jairus came. He was leader of the synagogue. He fell down at Jesus' feet and pleaded with him to come to his house because he had an only daughter about 12 years old and she was dying. While he was going, the crowds were nearly crushing him. A woman suffering from bleeding for 12 years, who had spent all she had on doctors and yet could not be healed by any, approached from behind and touched the end of his robe. Instantly her bleeding stopped. Who touched me? Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, Master, the crowds are hemming you in and pressing against you. Someone did touch me, said Jesus. I know that power has gone out from me. When the woman saw that she was discovered, she came trembling and fell down before him. In the presence of all the people, she declared the reason she had touched him and how she was instantly healed. Daughter, he said to her, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. While he was still speaking, someone came from the synagogue leader's house and said, your daughter is dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore. When Jesus heard it, he answered, don't be afraid. Only believe, and she will be saved. After he came to the house, he let no one enter with him except Peter, John, James, and the child's father and mother. Everyone was crying and mourning for her, but he said, stop crying, because she is not dead but asleep. They laughed at him because they knew she was dead. So he took her by the hand and called out, child, get up, or Talitha cum. Her spirit returned and she got up at once. Then he gave orders that she be given something to eat. Her parents were astounded, but he instructed them to tell no one what had happened. So there's a lot in this story. I'm not going to get into all the points I'd love to get into about this story. But when I think about Jesus, there's two things I wanted to point out in this story. He had this chance encounter with this one woman, right? And her story's in here, and we don't know if she went on to become a disciple. We don't know her name. We don't know anything like that. But one point I'd like to make about Jesus, one thing that, can help you to have an impact and help you to have great relationships is you have to be interruptible. You see, Jesus was on the way. Hey, this child is sick. Synagogue leader Jairus, his daughter's sick. He's helped build our, this is an important guy in the town. Jesus is on the way to heal his daughter, and he's got a crowd. And, I love thinking about the apostles. They're kind of his bodyguards a little bit, right? But Peter, these guys are right up close, and everybody's pressing in. Everybody's trying to get a piece of Jesus. And this woman sneaks through the crowd, touches the end of his garment. Right? I love this story so much we don't have time to get into about Jesus, him not becoming unclean because she touched him, but him transferring his cleanliness to her. Right? That's a whole nother sermon. But again, the point I want to make about friendships that we can see from Jesus, part of this story, is you've got to be interruptible. Right? You've got to be interruptible. Now, I understand sometimes you're working on the work and you got what's going on and you need to finish a task, right? We can't be, totally always just every text that comes through, every phone call. Sometimes you let it go to voicemail, but you need to call them back. Sometimes you get the text, you need to answer it later, but how interruptible are you? If you're like, man, I don't have great friendships, how interruptible is your, work and after school sports and this and that, and you go to concerts and you do this? Like, does anybody ever have time to even get into your schedule? If you're concerned about, man, I don't have great friendships at Cornerstone, how interruptible are you? Do you plan for time with people? And even when you didn't plan for time with people, right? Some of the best times, right, you have with people are just when folks just stop by. I love that about my parents' house growing up. We just had the house where people just stop by. Sometimes, it's not happening often, but one time I think I was driving up because I was late turning in some receipts. Sorry, Renita. But I was driving up to Renita to hand in some receipts, and she doesn't live too far from Greg. I'm like, hey, Greg, what are you doing? And, just stop by. Right? I remember there was one time I'd gone to get Chloe some Chick-fil-A or something off Old Peachtree or somewhere over in the area, and they forgot to give her ketchup, and Chloe can't eat her Chick-fil-A without ketchup. I called up Kim Vance and said, hey, Kim, are you home? Do you happen to have some ketchup? She was home, so Chloe went to get some ketchup, right? But again, these are kind of silly examples, but again, are you interruptible is the point. If you want to have great relationships, you've got to be interruptible. And I get it when you got a baby and you're not getting a lot of sleep. Or two, Hamilton, Moss says, I get it when you got small kids, and but again, your schedule can't be so packed that there ain't room for the Holy Spirit, that there ain't room for a friend in need, that there ain't room for somebody that may be trying to build a relationship with you. But, you go on further, and Jesus goes into the house and who does he take? James, Peter, and John. One of the things that has happened over the years that it has allowed me to, I think, have some great friendships with other disciples is sometimes you just got to serve together. You need to be serving God together. I love that they went in and Jesus was like, hey, I want y'all to see this. I think it was a training moment also. But also, again, it was just some time together, doing the ministry, doing it, doing it all together. I think about when I was over at Northview, I had some great friends, Lolly, Wayne, and Andreas. And I think about my friendship with Lolly really started when we were studying the Bible together with Wayne. And we got to really know each other. We were in the trenches together. We were praying together. We were having a lot of conversations about that old knucklehead Wayne, but he ended up getting baptized and it was awesome. And then Wayne started studying the Bible with this guy named Andreas. And then it was me, Lolly, and Wayne. And we were studying with Andreas. And it just kind of became our Bible study crew. We eventually studied the Bible with this guy named Jonte. And it was this was the group. Whenever somebody came to church, one of us met a visitor, brought a visitor, the three of us were going to get together and we were going to study with them. Right? Do you have people like that at Cornerstone where, you know what, man, hey, somebody came to church, or I've got this great friend. Would you build a friendship with them with me? Right? How is it, man? Some of those fires, building and serving together, the trials, the prayers, the tears, the struggle. One of the stories I've heard from Kim and Vicky several times is how did they become great friends? Because it ain't because they both love college football. Right? We know one of them does and one of them does not, right? And you talk to them, they're like, man, we are so different, whether it's the movies that we like or this that we like. How did you become close? Well, some years ago, both of their husbands were serving on a board during a pretty rough time in Cornerstone's history. And there was a lot of late, long board meetings and a lot of prayers and tears. And they forged a friendship through the fire of, praying and pleading for their husbands and for the church together. And now they're inseparable and they go on like 3-hour lunches. And, it's like, it's just like, But again, when you're serving with people together, it builds those bonds. It builds those bonds. And again, we can go after having connection groups and life groups, but there's something about you've got to make a decision to serve God together with people. Think about our time in Kansas City with the Rossboroughs and another family, Richard and Celeste Dixon, and we did Habitat for Humanity together, and we had a Bible talk together every Thursday night. We used to have Bible talk, and we would play rock band together, and we studied the Bible with people together, and it's just, again, we were just serving in the ministry together. That's how you build great friendships. I think Jesus did it with James, Peter, and John. They learned some things. They saw some things together. Builds those bonds. Luke chapter 9, 28 through 36. About 8 days after this conversation, he took Peter, John, and James and went up on the mountain to pray. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly, 2 men were talking with him, Moses and Elijah. They appeared in glory and were speaking of his departure, which he was about to accomplish in Jerusalem. Peter and those with him were in a deep sleep, and when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men that were standing with him. As the 2 men were departing from him, Peter said to Jesus, Master, it's good for us to be here. Let us set up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. Pardon me, not knowing what he was saying. While he was saying this, a cloud appeared and overshadowed them. They became afraid as they entered the cloud. Then a voice came from the cloud saying, This is my son, the chosen one. Listen to him. After the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone. They kept silent, and at that time, they told no one what they had seen. If you want to build great friendships, you've got to spend some time together away. Right? Now I get it. Planning a vacation with other people can be stressful. It can cause tension on the friendship, on the relationships, But man, I promise you, think about it. I think in some ways it started, Byron and Danielle drive from really, really far to be here. So we always appreciate how much they serve the church, serve the Lord. And several times a week they're driving up here, whether it's going to pick up Mr. Will, whether it's going to meet with, somebody else, whether it's coming up for a Bible study. They put so many miles on their car. And so, a few years in here, we said, hey, I know Sundays isn't early because they get up at the crack of dawn to be here before 8. So why don't you just spend the night? So, spend the night at our house a couple of times. And then one President's Day break, we decided to get an Airbnb and we all went out of town together with our families. Right? And then last year, after both of our daughters graduated, we all went to the Dominican Republic together. Them and the Welches. And man, I'm telling you, it's just something about when you're away from work and all this stuff and you're just hanging out. right? Now, I'm sure Jesus had there was a purpose in mind of him going up there to pray and whatever, but it was also just time away, right? I know there's several of you that go on vacation together, right? And I know, again, like I said, you have to build up to that point. It starts with point one, intentionality. Point two, serving together, right? And then you get to this point where you have a friendship and you feel like, let's, and again, it doesn't have to be some crazy elaborate, we saved up and we planned to take our graduating seniors to the Dominican Republic. It ain't always going to be the Dominican Republic, right? But guess what? Memorial Day weekend is coming up. Right? Maybe it's just a cabin retreat for the weekend. It can start with something small. See how you like each other when you see them in the morning and they got more, and you see how they like runny eggs and you don't, and they like that bacon, not crispy. Ron and I like it crispy, you know what I mean? But then there's folks out there that's like, that thing ain't dead. What is wrong with you? How are you eating that? But you learn those things, and you, again, learn just time away. Time away. Pam is great about this. Pam has friends. I always hear about Pam. Pam's going to Florida to meet a friend, somebody she's known for years, and then she's going to this state. I mean, just that time when you're just away from everything and you get to just spend some time just being friends, just away being friends. Right? And then you have spirit experiences, you have laughs, we have jokes about how Byron think he's Dominican, he think he speaks Spanish, and every time we go out somewhere and we get food to go, we say, to go, because he thought that's how you say, I'm like, that's not how you say to go in Spanish, but you don't just add an accent on it, but it's a running joke with us, at this point. And we've got great pictures and great memories, from our times together. Right? Man, maybe I know maybe it's already planned for this year, but you can look for your calendar for next year and say, man, we've just never been, let's try this. Let's go after building a friendship and getting away, And again, some of those are some practicals going on vacation, but it could also be just getting a group chat going. I think about all the laughs and fun and jokes on the group chat. It's just always so funny, whether it's memes, that people are sharing, or things. It can start small there, but you got to learn to get some time where you're not necessarily serving in the ministry, you're not necessarily doing something for church, you're just hanging out with people away. And I think Jesus was a master at this. I think about the times when Greg and I have gone to conferences and just the drive up where we're listening to a book on tape and talking about how we're doing and staying in the hotel room and we just talk and we go to the classes and we talk about it, right? You just got to have that time away, just some time to sit and talk with your friends. Again, it goes back to, I think you got to be intentional about it though too. Finally, over in Mark chapter 14, it's a story we all know, we all associate with Jesus. So Jesus was very intentional, I think, in choosing the guys he chose to build a friendship with. He served with them together in the ministry. They got time away together. But also one of the things that I love about Jesus, and I think we all need to imitate, was while there was a lot of fun, a lot of work, and a lot of ministry and different things going on, there were some real deep talks. And you're not going to be able to have great friendships if you're not having real deep talks. Over in Mark chapter 14 and verse 32, it says, "Then they came to a place called Gethsemane, and he told his disciples, 'Sit here while I pray.' He took Peter, James, and John with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. He said to them, 'I am deeply grieved, or my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me.' He went a little farther, fell to the ground, and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, 'Abba, Father, all these things are possible for you. Take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what you will.' Then he came and found them sleeping. He said to Peter, 'Simon, are you sleeping? Couldn't you stay awake 1 hour? Stay awake and pray so that you won't enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.' Once again, he went away and prayed, saying the same thing. And he came again and found them sleeping because they could not keep their eyes open. They did not know what to say to him. Then he came a third time and said to them, 'Are you still sleeping and resting? Enough. The time has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let's go. See, my betrayer is near.'" Now, these guys weren't exactly being great friends to Jesus in this point, but I appreciate his example. In Hebrews, it talks about Jesus was tempted with every sin just in the same way we are. We have a high priest that can sympathize. He can sympathize and empathize with us in our weaknesses. What does that mean? That means, guess what? If you've struggled with fear and insecurity, Jesus was tempted in the same way. If you struggled with the temptation to lust, Jesus was tempted in the same way. If you struggled with depression, perhaps even thoughts of suicide, I tend to think right here, this is when Jesus was thinking, it would be easier and better to just kill myself than to go through what I'm about to go through. Jesus was tempted in every way. And I love that we have this recorded. The reason we have this recorded in Scripture is because Jesus was humble enough to admit this to some friends. The reason we have this example is he opened his mouth about, man, I am at what I think is the lowest point. I feel so sad right now. I feel like I'm going to die. Luke's example tells us that he went out and prayed, and he was praying, his sweat was dropping like blood. An angel had to come and encourage him, right? But in this moment, in what was his moment, he didn't, I got to keep it strong because I'm the leader. They can't see me ever have a moment of weakness. They can't see me struggle with sadness or depression or perhaps even, nope. Jesus did not have that mindset. Jesus said, guys, he put James, Peter, and John. He didn't say this to everybody. Again, you're not going to be best friends with everybody in this room. That's my struggle. I want to be best friends. I want to just hang out and be with everybody, right? I have to be discipled a lot of Fenton, James, Peter, and John. You got it, right? But man, you've got to have some people that, man, you get real, you keep it real, and you have those deep talks. I don't care about celebrities. Like People Magazine and the stuff they go, like, I don't care. That is not my thing. I could care less about what's going on with those folks. It's not my thing. It doesn't move me. I don't really care. But a few years ago when Chadwick Boseman died, I don't know, it was just different for me. It was like, man, he's Black Panther. He's this young actor. And, again, it just seemed like nobody even knew. It just was a surprise. And that was just like the greatest movie I'd ever seen. And so when I found the news that Chadwick Boseman, I was really, really upset about it. I called Byron. It was an ugly cry. I was ugly crying on the phone. I felt so discouraged, and y'all are like, what? Who cares, right? But it was a real, like I said, that stuff doesn't move me, but I'm just crying on the phone, I was like, Brian, it doesn't seem fair. Like, I'm literally like a 10-year-old, like, it's not fair. Why did he have to die? But I've got a friend that I can talk to like that. That I can say, man, let's pray about it. You've got to have those deep talks, man. I love my relationships with the elders. Again, years ago when we were first having discussions about, Fenton, the elders, and is evangelist going to pick them, and is he just going to pick people that are yes men? And man, if y'all are ever in our meetings, the stuff they be saying to me, like, yeah, but we've got that kind of relationship where they can say some tough stuff to me because we've been through it. We're serving in the ministry together. You got to have those kind of people. You got to have the type of friends in your life that can say, no, that's not a good idea. No, you can't or you shouldn't do that. Brother, you need to repent. But it only comes if you have those kind of relationships where you talk about the real stuff. 2 verses to close out, just for you to reflect on. Proverbs 27, better is open rebuke than hidden love. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. Whenever Byron says real talk, that's his phrase. I know it's coming. Whenever he's like, real talk, I'm like, hey, man, all right, gird your loins. Here we go. Man, but I just appreciate better is open rebuke than hidden love. Wounds from a friend can be trusted. She's not down here. Lish is really, really great at friendships. She's really great. You hear her talk about her best friends. If you were at her wedding and saw the friends she's had for a very long time, she'd be a great person to talk. Man, how did you build some of these friendships? Or how do you maintain, great friendships? She'd be a great person to talk to about great friendships. There's a lot of people in here who are great at friendship, but I love this quote. It says, make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver, the other is gold. One of Lish's phrases is, you can't make new old friends. There's some people that have only, you can't suddenly have somebody that's known you for 20 years. right? I'm really bad about, I'm kind of, the people that are in front of me, that's where I'm at. I'm bad with my older friends. They know it. I know it. We all know it. I need to be better, about it. But man, you got to have these kind of people that, wounds from a friend can be trusted. And Paul wrote this, just one caution. Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. Back to point one about being intentional. This is the Bible's version of birds of a feather flock together, right? For my middle schoolers, including my daughter who's not paying attention right now, right? This is a real deal. Bad company corrupts good character, right? You need to be wise about the friendships you choose. You need to be wise about who you let speak into your spirit, who you let speak into your life, who you hang around. Now, here's the deal. We're in the world, but not of the world, right? So, yes, you should have friends that are not disciples. But hopefully, you're helping them to be closer to God, to know God. You're influencing them, and they're not influencing you, right? Bad company corrupts good character. So that's just, something to think about. I truly feel like it is a conviction of mine. Your closest friends should be disciples, right? And I think if we imitate some of the tools of Jesus and him with James, Peter, and John and what we saw today, we can have those kind of relationships. So Vicky's going to come up and do the announcements. But as she's coming up, I want you to think about this question. How will you go after deep friendships at Cornerstone today? Like, what can you do today? Can you pull out your calendar today, right? And then this week, how can you follow up on what you put in your calendar? This month and even this year, right? So let's imitate Jesus, and we can have the kind of friendships that will change the world. People said they're not going to know you by your preaching, by your singing, by your worship, by your building. The world is going to know you're my disciples if you love one another. If we have the kind of friendships that Jesus had, we can impact the world in a great way for God. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Amen.